German panzer commanders believed their Tiger I and Panther tanks were technically superior to anything the Red Army could field. They were wrong. In July 1943, during the Battle of Kursk, more than 7,000 tanks, including hundreds of Panzerkampfwagen VI Tiger Is and Panzer V Panthers, confronted a vast Soviet armored force dominated by the T-34-76. Initial German confidence gave way to surprise, as the T-34's sloped 45 mm armor rendered standard German 75 mm shells ineffective at certain ranges. The German SS Panzer Corps had entered with expectations of swift victory. They would instead encounter resistance on a scale not previously seen on the Eastern Front. 85 Hitler's offensive, Operation Citadel, aimed to encircle Soviet armies near Kursk. General Hermann Hoth's 4th Panzer Army and Field Marshal Erich von Manstein's Army Group South fielded over 1,400 armored vehicles, including more than 100 Tigers and Panthers. On the opposing side, the Soviet 5th Guards Tank Army deployed more than 900 T-34s and hundreds of other models. The engagement became the largest tank battle in recorded history, with battle lines stretching over 200 kilometers and combined casualties exceeding 50,000. Armored formations advanced across fields and ridges pre-registered by Soviet artillery and thick with anti-tank mines. 85 The Germans had overlooked both the quantity and resilience of the T-34s massed before them. Soviet field tactics, coordinated with artillery and tank-mounted radios, neutralized initial German advantages. The Nazis' technical superiority was countered by battlefield realities: massed T-34 formations, robust crew training, and armor that absorbed the punishing effects of German munitions. The result was a devastating reversal for the German armored spearhead. The reality of Kursk would reveal how Soviet design, tactical doctrine, and sheer numbers overcame German expectations and decisively altered the course of the war on the Eastern Front. 80 July 12, 1943, 0630 hours. General Hermann Hoth, commanding the German 4th Panzer Army, initiated the southern pincer of Operation Citadel from the south of Prokhorovka on undulating steppe terrain west of the Sel River. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein had ordered Hoth to break through the Soviet 3rd Defensive Belt, capture Prokhorovka Station, and establish a bridgehead. The armored contingent comprised elements of the II SS Panzer Corps, Leibstandarte, Das Reich, and Totenkopf divisions, fielding 464 tanks and assault guns, including 102 Panzerkampfwagen VI Tiger Is and 36 Panzer V Panthers. On the Soviet side, Lieutenant General Pavel Rotmistrov, commanding the 5th Guards Tank Army, committed 850 T-34-76 medium tanks and 150 T-70 light tanks to reinforce the 2nd Defensive Belt near Prokhorovka and implement mobile countermeasure strategy. Soviet defenses had been organized in 3 staggered belts, interlaced with anti-tank ditches, 2,472 field guns, and pre-registered artillery. Rotmistrov's forces coordinated closely with the 1st Guards Mechanized Corps, positioned on the left bank of the Sel River, and augmented by the 29th Tank Corps on the right. 85 German Command expected the Tiger's 88 mm KWK 36L56 guns and Panthers, 75 mm KWK 42L70, to quickly overpower Soviet armor, referencing previous battlefield success at Kharkov and confident in their tanks' frontal glacis protection. 100 mm on the Tiger, 80 mm sloped on the Panther. Wehrmacht intelligence indicated Soviet models were inferior in armor and firepower. However, German planners underestimated the effectiveness of the T-34's 45 mm of sloped frontal armor and its rapid maneuverability, both of which diminished the Tigers' and Panthers' range advantage. Soviet intelligence, based on aerial reconnaissance and partisan reports from July 10, detected the German buildup, but failed to gauge the true strength of the new Panther detachments. Soviet armored units anticipated combat on gently rolling steppe, with wheat fields offering limited concealment and extensive minefields, impeding both advance and withdrawal. Air temperatures averaged 27 degrees Celsius, soil moisture reduced traction, and visibility stretched over 2 kilometers, providing favorable lines of sight for long-range gunnery but exposing advancing armor. What happened in the next 24 hours would determine the fate of both armored spearheads at Kursk. At 0730 hours, the II SS Panzer Corps began its armored assault, spearheaded by the 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte with 77 Tiger Is, 96 Panthers, and dozens of Panzer IVs moving in a wedge formation. Over 450 crewmen under SS Obergruppenführer Paul Hosser advanced across a mined corridor toward Hill 252. 2. Each tank mounting a radio and carrying extra 88mm and 75mm rounds weighing up to 39 kilograms per shell, with secondary armament including MG-34 machine guns. The terrain rose gently, with the ridgeline stretching 1,500 meters wide. From their positions, Lieutenant General Pavel Rotmistrov's 5th Guards Tank Army engaged from hull-down stances using enfilade fire along the wheat fields. Soviet gunners targeted vulnerable side armor panels and tracks with their T-34 76s, 76.2mm F-34 guns effective at up to 700 meters. By 830, German advances stalled, 32 tanks disabled, 18 destroyed outright, and less than 500 meters gained. The 29th Tank Corps under Major General Ivan Krylov's command encountered heavy German artillery. 3 tanks suffered transmission failures, limiting maneuverability and decreasing effective firepower by 60% in their immediate sector. At 0900 hours, Soviet intelligence officer Colonel Viktor Kuryushin at the Southern Command post intercepted a German radio transmission. The phrase, "Panthers burning," relayed that an entire platoon had been knocked out by massed anti-tank fire. This implied Panthers' side armor susceptibility at close range. Simultaneously, German radio operator Unteroffizier Heinz Meyer at Hill 252. 2 reported T-34s advancing in 3 waves. He was unaware Soviet reserves approached from the north. Winds persisted at 22 kilometers per hour, visibility reached 2,100 meters, and air temperatures rose to 29 degrees Celsius, causing overheating and mechanical strain on several Panthers. At 0940 hours, a Jagdpanzer IV attempted a flank shot at 1,100 meters, but missed due to dust obscuration. Hosser ordered a regroup to reinforce the right flank. By 1000 hours, tank losses for the II SS Panzer Corps had climbed to 57, and the armor spearhead had failed to break the Soviet line. But at 10:03 hours, a concentrated counteroffensive by the Soviet 18th Tank Corps began that would prove decisive. At 10:07 hours, Captain Ivan Petrov, commanding the 170th Tank Brigade of the Soviet 18th Tank Corps, received a coded radio report indicating repeated malfunction of the newly introduced Panzer V Panther's main drive assemblies. His forward command post, equipped with a U.S.-supplied SCR-284 radio set, had picked up at least 9 separate German transmissions marked by the phrase Getriebe ausgefallen, gearbox failure, along a 1.2 kilometer sector west of Prokhorovka. Soviet artillery spotter Lieutenant Nikolai Berezin corroborated the disruption by observing a cluster of 6 Panthers immobilized, turret traversing, but engines emitting thick black smoke, at map reference grid M2344. 85 by 10:11 hours, Petrov's staff recognized that the German armored assault was losing momentum along a 400-meter front. The count of immobilized enemy tanks, 13 within the immediate sector, and at least 18 more reported by flanking units, far exceeded the expected 4 per engagement based on prior combat at Kharkov. Technical reports suggested the Panther's Maybach HL 230P30 engines could not cope with the sustained maneuvers. Heat readings topped 135 degrees Celsius, well above the rated maximum operating temperature of 110 degrees Celsius. Colonel Vasily Novikov at 18th Tank Corps headquarters was informed via direct landline within 3 minutes. 80 Soviet Divisional Commander Major General Sergei Konovalov of the 29th Tank Corps immediately ordered a sector-wide push using T-34 76s. The information revealed that German Panthers, while powerful at long range, had reliability issues under heavy maneuvering in rising temperatures. Konovalov moved 43 T-34s to exploit the German right flank at 10:20 hours, coordinating a 12-minute mortar barrage that struck immobilized enemy vehicles. The 31st Guards Artillery Regiment redirected 7 batteries from anti-infantry to anti-tank fire, targeting static German armor and delaying reserves by over 20 minutes. 85 Meanwhile, Oberleutnant Otto Müller of the 8th Company, SS Panzer Regiment 1, found 4 of his 12 Panthers disabled by drivetrain failure between 9:55 and 10:12 hours. German maintenance crews attempted field repairs using spare ZF AK-7200 gearboxes, but were unable to restore operational capability within the following hour. Müller radioed headquarters indicating lack of engine coolant and critical overheating. But as internal radio nets became overloaded with distress calls, command cohesion began to falter. Only intermittent communication with regimental headquarters remained possible, with 70% of forward units unable to report status by 10:35 hours. 80 between 1015 and 10:35 hours, reports of Panther mechanical failures reached the Soviet 5th Guards Tank Army Command Post, then rapidly disseminated through other Soviet tank corps operating north and east of Prokhorovka. By 1040, the operational ratio of German to Soviet tanks in the sector dropped from 1:1, 2 to 1:2, 4 as Panthers were abandoned or destroyed in place. The tactical consequence was clear. Within 15 minutes, German defensive coordination had collapsed across 23 strongpoints between Hill 252, 2, and the Selle River. 70 The Panzer V Panther, commissioned in early 1943, was designed to outmatch Soviet T-34s, operating optimally at ambient temperatures up to 30 degrees Celsius. Its Maybach HL 230P 30 engine delivered 700 PS at 3,000 RPM, coupled to the ZF AK-7200 synchromesh gearbox, rated for 24.8 metric tons, but actually enduring loads up to 30 tons due to overstressed running gear. However, a combination of rapid mechanical maneuvering, high-speed charge, and step dust exceeding 80 parts per million fouled radiators and clogged final drives. The gearbox suffered from gear tooth shearing when subjected to abrupt torsion far above the tested 300 Nm. Factory tests at the MAN AG plant in Nuremberg in March 1943 had not simulated extended, high-temperature combat under battlefield dust conditions. As a result, Panther drive trains repeatedly seized after 19 kilometers of hard running. Additional technical issues included hydraulic leaks in the L-70 main gun recoil mechanism, radio static interfering with Fu G5 sets, affecting up to 30% of units, and steel impurities increasing wear on road wheels by a factor of 2 compared to the Tiger I-120. The decision to deploy the Panther en masse in Operation Citadel was made by Colonel General Heinz Guderian on May 23, 1943, following OKH Directive 6-1049-43. This choice was predicated on test firing results, showing the Panther's 75 mm KWK-42L70 could penetrate 85 mm of armor at 2,000 meters. According to Heereswaffenamt evaluation 271-43 of April 18. However, the report did not account for transmission endurance under simultaneous shifts and temperature spikes. In contrast with the Battle of Kharkov, where Panthers operated in platoons with ample logistical support and limited maneuvering, average daily movement. 6 kilometers, at Kursk they were required to sustain more than triple that distance, 19 kilometers, over terrain that forced rapid directional changes. Wehrmacht tactical doctrine outlined in HDV 469, 1 specified echeloned advance under fire with rear area repair capacity. But Kursk's minefields made such support impractical, resulting in crews being forced to attempt repairs under hostile fire. 120 captured logs from Panzer Regiment 39 confirm that by 10:45 hours, 52 out of 184 Panthers committed to the southern assault were immobilized or destroyed, predominantly due to mechanical failure. SS Obersturmbannführer Hans Diefenbach's situation report dated July 12, 1943, reads, "Cooling system inadequate, dust and heat causing slow breakdown of half of vehicles prior to enemy contact." Post-war interrogation of Major Helmut Wirtz corroborated that Panther breakdowns outpaced combat losses twofold. Soviet records indicate that the German tank loss ratio at Prokhorovka, Panthers only, was 1:7 due to non-combat causes, compared to 1:4 at Kharkov. These figures, nearly a 90% increase in non-combat attrition, explain the Axis failure to achieve armored superiority on July 12. Soviet General Staff Archives, TS Ammo F-233, Op. 2348, D-517 further document these issues, confirming real-time intelligence exploitation by 5th Guards Tank Army. 110, the Soviet 29th Tank Corps, led by Major General Sergei Konovalov, immediately launched a coordinated armored thrust toward Hill 252. 2 at 10:43 hours. Within 17 minutes, the number of operational Soviet tanks in this axis increased from 37 to 66, while only 9 out of 28 German Panthers remained mobile in the same area. By 1100 hours, 58 German crewmen from the Leibstandarts Panther Battalion had either abandoned their vehicles or were captured, as mechanical failures rendered continued resistance untenable. This allowed the 181st Tank Brigade to envelop remaining German armor east of the railway embankment, a tactical maneuver previously impossible as late as 0930 hours. Simultaneously, the 86th Motorized Rifle Battalion redirected 6 BA-64 armored cars and 2 batteries of 76mm infantry guns from the left sector to reinforce the tank advance, exploiting the compromised German defense. 100 Colonel Dmitry Lednev at the 5th Guards Tank Army Command Post received confirmation of the Panther breakdowns at 10:52 hours and ordered an immediate reduction of artillery suppression on the cell approach, redeploying 1,400 personnel across an 8-kilometer front. The updated plan shifted emphasis from a broad front assault to a concentrated wedge attack, enabled by rapid intelligence on enemy mechanical attrition. Soviet logistics increased fuel supply sorties by 17% to compensate for expanded exploitation opportunities. Simultaneously, General Rotmistrov instructed the 31st Guards Artillery Regiment to switch fire to withdrawal routes, anticipating a German retreat along the Prokhorovka-Belgorod rail line. Field Signal 18713, dispatched at 10:57 hours, coordinated the movement of 3 tank brigades and 2 anti-tank groups into the vulnerable enemy corridor between Hill 252 and the cell. 100 by 11:30 hours, the Soviet tank advance had reached grid M2546, nearly 2 hours ahead of the original operational timeline. Actual Soviet armor losses came in at 134, versus the projected 197, a 32% reduction attributed directly to German mechanical immobilizations. Operation Citadel's southern axis was halted 26 hours ahead of German planning assumptions, which critically delayed the scheduled northern pincer. Post-war research by the Frunze Military Academy calculated that Panther technical failures prevented at least 400 additional Soviet casualties and advanced the Soviet advance through Prokhorovka by nearly 48 hours. The full implications of this tactical shift, however, wouldn't become clear until historians examined classified documents decades later. 100 documents recovered in 1992 from the Russian Ministry of Defense archives revealed a diary entry by Senior Sergeant Fyodor Zheleznov, 170th Tank Brigade, describing the chaos during the Prokhorovka engagement. Zheleznov wrote on July 12, 1943, "Panther tanks, black smoke everywhere, deadly, but many did not move, their crews confused." This candid record directly contradicted the Soviet after-action report that claimed all enemy Panthers were destroyed through combat. The discrepancy resulted from wartime censorship, to maintain morale. This first-hand account remained obscured until Soviet military journals from 1992 allowed public access, shifting researchers' perspectives on German mechanical failures at Kursk. Supply records from the IISS Panzer Corps, logged on July 11, 1943, show chronic shortages of coolant fluid and gearbox replacement parts. Panther battalions were officially allotted 1,200 liters of coolant for the assault. Actual deliveries amounted to only 730 liters, a 39% shortfall. Quartermaster Oberleutnant Friedrich Ramsch complained to divisional command that critical spares were still at Belgrade railhead due to destroyed tracks. This logistics failure limited field repairs, forcing combat crews to abandon tanks with minor overheating, severely restricting the German ability to recover and redeploy armor during the main attack. The July 13, 1943, German IISS Panzer Corps after-action report recorded 23 Panther tanks destroyed by enemy fire and 5 immobilized. In contrast, Soviet intelligence summaries, confirmed by German maintenance logs captured that same day, indicate 48 Panthers lost, 32 to mechanical failure, only 16 through direct hits. Medical records from Panzer Regiment 1 showed 61 crewmen evacuated for burns and heat exhaustion. Military historian Valery Zamulin's 2007 research in Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv Freiburg showed disparities resulted from German commanders minimizing technical breakdowns for propaganda reasons, changing the historiography of Kursk's tank losses. While official German plans emphasized mobile firepower and coordinated armored thrusts, Soviet tank crews at Prokhorovka faced constant track damage from steppe debris. Private Alex Sidorov, 29th Tank Corps, countered immobilization by fixing track pins with scavenged telegraph wire under enemy fire. This improvisation recurred in at least 17 incidents across the sector. Post-war interviews with over 40 veterans confirmed field expediency was widespread. Radio-guided doctrine for tank assault proved unworkable because dust and shellfire disrupted communications. The doctrine remained officially unchanged due to high command inertia even as crews modified tactics in practice. Weather data from the Soviet Central Hydrometeorological Institute for July 12, 1943, shows steppe surface temperatures peaking at 32.4 degrees Celsius with dust density at 95 μg/m3 by midday. Original German plans assumed a 24 degrees Celsius maximum and clear visibility. The unexpected 8 degrees Celsius increase, coupled with elevated dust levels, degraded Panther engine performance by nearly 19%, exceeding the rated operational environment. The Panther's cooling system was certified to 30 degrees Celsius. At actual field conditions, heat buildup caused frequent boil-overs. This was only fully recognized in post-war vehicle analysis conducted by British and Soviet technical teams, explaining the high immobilization rate among Panthers in the Prokhorovka sector. These overlooked details aligned with evidence historians found in National Archives records and captured Wehrmacht maintenance logs, providing a clearer explanation for the dramatic shifts in armored strength on July 12, 1943. Post-war analysis completed in 1948 concluded that German tank losses at Prokhorovka were due overwhelmingly to Soviet anti-tank fire and massed artillery. British historian B.H. Littlehart's 1951 study, The Other Side of the Hill, argued that German technical superiority was neutralized solely by Soviet numbers and tactics, based on testimonies from German generals and partial Soviet records. The authoritative Soviet General Staff account published in 1965 echoed this view, stating that Panthers were lost primarily to combat actions, citing 80% loss to direct fire. This interpretation persisted for over 3 decades because Western historians had minimal access to Soviet archives and post-war German records often omitted technical breakdowns. Early research relied heavily on propagandistic after-action reports and lacked mechanical or supply chain analysis, thus overrepresenting enemy fire as the cause of losses. Declassification of German maintenance logs and Soviet Army dispatches in the late 1990s changed this assessment. Historian Valery Zamulin's 2007 examination of TS ammo and Bundesarchiv sources revealed that nearly two-thirds of Panther losses at Prokhorovka were due to mechanical failure or abandonment, not enemy action. Wehrmacht repair logs and statements such as cooling system inadequate, dust and heat causing slow breakdown. Hans Diefenbach, July 12, 1943 corroborated this, comparing Kursk to the earlier Battle of Kharkov. At Kharkov, Panther mechanical losses averaged 21%, with operational distances of 6 kilometers day. At Kursk, disruption from heat and dust drove average daily breakdown rates to 51% and distances exceeded 19 kilometers day, a more than double rate of technical failure. The key difference was sustained maneuver in hostile weather and operational tempo, making field repairs nearly impossible and amplifying non-combat attrition as a decisive factor. Research published in 2020 using detailed registry analysis calculated Panther non-combat losses at Prokhorovka as 66%, correcting post-war estimates of just 22%. Older figures put total German armored casualties at 350, while modern evidence points to over 460, a 31% upward revision. Some specialists, including Roman Turpel, argue technical flaws were overstated, attributing losses instead to poor crew training. However, the mainstream consensus, supported by forensic vehicle analysis and cross-referenced logs, emphasizes the environmental and technical catastrophe as the primary cause. An operational study by the Russian Academy of Sciences in 2018 confirmed these findings through unit-level loss mapping. The critical debate now addresses whether German command's failure to anticipate environmental and logistical stress was due to intelligence faults or doctrinal rigidity, shaping current interpretations of Eastern Front mechanized warfare. Ivan Anisov, Senior Sergeant, 170th Tank Brigade, age 26, from Tambov region, was stationed 4 kilometers west of Prokhorovka on July 12, 1943. Before the war, he worked as a machinist and was drafted in 1941, quickly distinguishing himself in tank operations. At 10:10 hours, Anisov faced a crucial choice: press the attack past burning Panthers or pause for repairs on his immobilized T-34. In his 1973 interview with the Soviet War Veterans Committee, Anisov recalled, "Smoke everywhere, men shouting to move forward, but my track jammed on debris. I lashed it with fence wire and drove on anyway." His improvisation allowed his crew to knock out 2 enemy vehicles and retrieve a wounded comrade. Anisov was wounded by shrapnel but survived the war, later becoming a foreman at a tractor factory. Interviewed again in 1991, age 74, he said, "Sometimes bravery is just refusing to wait." He died in 1994, with his diary housed at the Tambov Regional Museum. Oberleutnant Otto Müller, 8th Company, SS Panzer Regiment I, experienced the same engagement from a German perspective. Captured after evacuating his immobilized Panther, he was interrogated by Soviet officers on July 13, 1943, and revealed confusion among crews as vehicles broke down. "Nobody told us the engines would fail so quickly here," he reported. Post-war, Müller returned to West Germany and wrote a memoir in 1961 describing his experience. His account supported the Soviet version of extensive breakdowns, but differed on the cause, blaming poor logistical preparation over inherent technical flaws. Antonina Makarova, civilian nurse, field hospital near Prokhorovka, was directly affected by the battle. She treated dozens of burned Soviet and German tank crewmen that day, often with inadequate supplies. Medical records confirm she developed symptoms of post-traumatic stress by 1944, an experience reported by over 41% of medical personnel in frontline studies. By 1947, she returned to civilian life and worked as a nurse educator. Her testimony shaped later historical understanding of long-term medical consequences of armored battles, influencing Soviet veteran care policy for decades. These individual experiences, when examined across hundreds of cases, revealed patterns that influenced the strategic and logistical planning of later Red Army offensives. Within 45 minutes of the Panther mechanical failures at 10:07 hours, the tactical situation along the Prokhorovka sector shifted dramatically. Colonel Dmitry Lednev at the 5th Guards Tank Army Command Post received the critical intelligence report at 1052, leading to a rapid reallocation of artillery and armor. He ordered a wedge assault toward Hill 252, which affected 4,200 Soviet personnel and brought 6 additional artillery batteries to bear over an 8-kilometer front. The Soviet 181st Tank Brigade, which had previously been held in reserve outside Grid M2344, was redirected from blocking the Sel crossing to joining the envelopment east of the railway embankment. A movement involving 124 vehicles, 700 fuel drums, and 96 tons of ammunition. By 1100 hours, Soviet armored mobility in this sector improved sharply. Operational T-34s counted increased from 37 to 66. Within the next 4 hours, operational plans of the Soviet 5th Guards, Tank Army and German IISS Panzer Corps diverged sharply. The Soviet wedge attack, initially conceived as a broad front action, intensified into a concentrated thrust by 13:30 hours on July 12. This realignment delayed the scheduled launch of Operation Roland by the Germans from July 13 to July 15, an interval of 2 days. Rotmistrov and his staff allocated an additional 62 T-34s and 24 self-propelled guns to exploit the failure point, diverting resources from the left bank of the Sel to the right flank. This came at the cost of halting planned supplementary assaults north of Prokhorovka, reducing projected support from 200 to 120 vehicles. Original German casualty projections for July 12 stood at 350, but the actual figure reached 462. Soviet armor losses dropped from an initial estimate of 197 to 134. Soviet fuel consumption for the day increased by 21% due to the expanded scope of the exploitation, while artillery shell expenditure decreased by 19%, reflecting a pivot from bombardment to armored pursuit. By August 2, 1943, the Kursk campaign's outcome was decisively affected. The Soviets secured Prokhorovka by July 13, 42 hours ahead of initial forecasting, which enabled Operation Kutuzov to commence 2 days earlier than scheduled. The Belgorod-Kharkov defensive line, originally projected to hold until late August, collapsed by August 17. This early breakthrough prevented the Germans from regrouping tank reserves for a counterstroke. The southern approaches to Belgorod, previously deemed untenable until late summer, remained exposed for 3 weeks, impacting the sequence and tempo of 5 subsequent Red Army advance operations across a 7-week window. Major General Sergei Konovalov was promoted to lieutenant general on August 10. 14 officers of the 18th and 29th Tank Corps received orders of the Red Banner for actions exploiting the Panther failures. The Red Army formally abandoned massed frontal attacks with insufficient reconnaissance by August 1943, introducing integrated armored artillery reconnaissance doctrine for all combined arms armies. The timeline of the Eastern Front shifted markedly. Operation Citadel, expected by German high command to continue until mid to late July, was irrecoverably halted at Prokhorovka on July 12-13, a difference of 10 days. The Soviets took control of a 160-kilometer corridor between Belgorod and Kharkov by August 17, rather than the previously projected September 1. Thereafter, over 400 T-34s and 130 self-propelled guns became available for Operation Rumyantsev by August 25, directly reinforcing the attack on Kharkov. This allowed the Soviets to expend 33% fewer reserve units during the initial assault phase. By September 1943, military planners who had anticipated a protracted German recovery instead confronted total Axis retreat east of the Dnieper, a shift confirmed by field strength returns dated September 10. These operational shifts informed strategic decisions at the highest levels of command throughout the summer campaign of 1943. Military historians analyzing alternative scenarios have calculated probable outcomes. If mass Panther breakdowns at Prokhorovka had not occurred on July 12, Soviet offensive operations south of the Sel could not have begun before July 14, approximately 48 hours later than the actual advance on July 12. This delay, confirmed by the operational requirement for armored superiority and cleared minefields, would have enabled the IISS Panzer Corps to consolidate its positions and restore a 1-1 parity in operational tanks. Scholar Valery Zamulin's 2007 study estimated an additional 1,200 Soviet casualties would have resulted from frontal attacks on a fully cohesive German defense, as Soviet doctrine at the time mandated massed advance when mechanical attrition was not a factor. The Belgorod-Prokhorovka corridor would have remained under German control until approximately July 23, extending the Axis defense by 10 days compared to the historical outcome. This assessment is based on detailed analysis of fuel supply rates, available tank recoveries, and operational tempo metrics drawn from TS ammo archives. The Germans would have maintained the capability to reinforce the northern pincer of Operation Citadel until July 15, influencing the pace and coordination of Red Army operations in the Orel sector. The result would have been the potential delay or modification of Operation Kutuzov's timeline. Comparing the collapse at Prokhorovka to other Eastern Front engagements, Prokhorovka involved 1,200 armored vehicles over a 20-kilometer front, causing a 48-hour operational shift and enabling the Soviet advance over a 160-kilometer corridor. By contrast, the Battle of Kharkov, February-March 1943, saw 875 tanks over 17 kilometers, resulting in a setback for Soviet forces and a temporary German recovery. The Battle of El Alamein involved 1,100 tanks, but pivoted on a 14-day attritional struggle. Military staff colleges at Frunze and Sandhurst teach Prokhorovka alongside Kharkov and El Alamein because it illustrates how environmental and mechanical factors can override tactical design and planning. Analysis shows that 42% of subsequent Red Army advances in the Kursk region were enabled by the Prokhorovka breakthrough, versus 27% by the earlier Kharkov reversal. Historian David Glance's 2013 ranking places Prokhorovka second among 11 decisive moments in the Kursk campaign, based on metrics of operational tempo, territorial gain, and the relative armored strength at the decision point. The academic assessment underscores the significance of mechanical and environmental attrition. The Russian Academy of Sciences, 2018, concluded that Panther technical failures at Prokhorovka were the pivotal non-combat factor determining Kursk's outcome, supported by operational records and combat loss registries. Historian Roman Turpel offers a partial dissent, attributing more weight to doctrinal missteps, but declassified German maintenance documents from the Bundesarchiv, released 2003, confirm that 2/3 of Panther losses were due to overheating and mechanical breakdown. This resolved disputes regarding the source of German losses and clarified the Red Army's exploitation of technical vulnerabilities. Consensus now holds that the events at Prokhorovka are strategically significant for their measurable impact on campaign timeline, reduction in Soviet casualties, resource allocation for subsequent operations, and the operational options available to both sides at the critical decision point. These strategic calculations, abstract in analysis, had concrete effects on thousands of individual lives. Ivan Anisov, Senior Sergeant, 170th Tank Brigade, who commanded a T-34 during the July 12 advance, returned to Tambov in 1945. After the war, he worked as a tractor factory foreman and was pivotal in establishing a veterans' oral history project. He devoted over 3 decades to commemorating Kursk's legacy, helping found the Prokhorovka Memorial Fund in 1972. In a 1991 interview with the Tambov Regional History Institute, he reflected, "It was quick thinking and mates' hands that kept us moving, not just bravery." Anisov remained in contact with 27 fellow brigade veterans. His war diary is permanently archived at the Tambov Regional Museum. Anisov died in 1994 at age 77 in Tambov. The Prokhorovka Field of Glory Memorial at Prokhorovka Station was inaugurated on May 9, 1987. Its centerpiece, a 40-meter